Okay, so this is chapter 1.5, rational number operations. By the end of this class, I should be able to evaluate expressions that deal with rational numbers. So example number 1 here says you're watching the weather network and it says that it will be negative 7.5 Fahrenheit and it will be very cold. What is the temperature in Celsius? Now, if you think of -7 degrees, you may think, oh, that's not very cold, but let's do calculations and see what actually ends up happening here. So here is the formula for calculating the Celsius temperature from the Fahrenheit. So there are two variables here, C and F. Now variables are basically containers that take on values, or containers that we don't know the value of, but if we do, we can replace the letter with the actual number. So here, this is the information that's given to us, and that's what you always have to do. Look at the information that's given and think about, is what variable does this apply to, or which container should that go into? And so this is actually the Fahrenheit is equal to negative 7.5. And so if you can think of the Fahrenheit here as a container, what containers look like this, maybe brackets. So the containers are brackets, and what I can do is place that information in the container. So let's do that. So C, I don't know, so I'm going to leave it. So 5/9 bracket. Now F, where's my container for F? So here's my container for F. So instead of F, inside here I'm going to put the value, which is negative 7.5 minus 32. Now, did I need containers? Did I need brackets there in this case? No, I did not. But sometimes you do, so you do have to be careful. Now here, what we're going to do is 5/9, and then I have to do brackets. I do have to follow BEDMAS, so I do these two first, and when I add those two, I get negative 39.5. Now, you can do this a couple of ways. Type it in your calculator, but what you're going to type in your calculator will be something like this. It'll be 5 divided by 9. So that 5/9 right here is 5 divided by 9. And then you're going to times it by negative 39.5. And then you should get an answer. Or what you can do is 5 times negative 39.5 and then divide that by 9, and that will also give you the same answer. So when you do that in your calculator, you should get something like negative 21.94, repeating, I believe. Okay, so that's the first example. So let's try adding and subtracting rational numbers now, and we've done this already, but what we need to do now is I'm going to add a few more negative signs here and there, so we do need to be careful here. So what I want to do in this case right here is, you see that negative is on the bottom, the denominator. I want to push that to the numerator. So remember what I taught you before is that you should understand that 3/-4 is actually the same thing as -3/4, which is the same thing as -3/4. So make sure you understand that. So what we get here is, again, I want to push that negative to the top. And of course, when we add or subtract rational numbers, we do need to have common denominators, and I could get common denominators by multiplying by 2 over here. So I get negative 6/8, okay, plus 5/8. So what you're going to actually add is negative 6 plus 5. So negative 6 plus 5 gives you negative 1/8. Okay, so let's try the next example. And in our next example, why don't you pause the video and then you can try it yourself. Now, again, what I want to do, when you have a lot of negative signs and positive signs, I would suggest that you would change this into improper fractions to make your life easier instead of having to borrow sometimes. So again, push the negatives to the top, so you're going to get negative 5 over 6, and this is going to be negative, again, 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1. That is 5 over 2. Remember, when you're converting into mixed number, you're not looking at that negative, okay? So it's going to be 2 times 2, which is positive 4 plus 1, which is 5. But again, that's negative 5 over 2 then. Now let's have, again, same common denominators. So multiply this by 3, multiply this one by 3 to get negative 5 minus 15 over 6 over 6. Again, if you look at what we have to subtract or add, is this up here, which is going to be negative 5 minus 15, which actually gives you negative 20 over 6. And I'm going to change that into a, I can reduce it here. You get what? Negative 10 over 3 by dividing both top and bottom by 2. And then I'm going to change that into a mixed number, which is going to end up being what? Negative 3 and 1/3. Okay, so let's try a couple more examples now. So let me just summarize here before we go on to multiplication division of rational numbers. When you're adding and subtracting, make sure you have common denominators, okay? And also you want to push the negative sign to the numerator. Okay. Alright, so now let's go to multiplying and dividing rational numbers. So let's take a look here, and it looks fairly ugly because there's so many negative signs. So let's just simplify this. So what I want to do here is look at this and look at this fraction right here, and what does it have right beside it? Negative and negative. You're looking at one fraction. So I'm looking just this fraction right here has a negative and negative. A negative of a negative. Opposite of negative is what? Positive. So actually I don't need those negatives. So I can simplify the signs to be 3 over 4 times negative 5 over 8. Now remember, when you're multiplying, you don't need common denominators. You just multiply across. And so what you're going to get is negative 15 over 32. And so that's how you do that first question. Okay, now let's go to the next question over here. Alright, so in this case, again, when you're multiplying or dividing fractions, you do need to change everything to improper fractions. So let's do that. Negative 6 over 7 divided by, here it's going to be 1 times 21, which is 21, plus 1, which is 22. So 22 over 21, but it is a negative, so it's a negative. Now what I want to do here is, like, I don't need all those negatives either here. So because negative, I know that negative divided by negative is going to turn out to be a positive, so I could just get rid of the negatives if I wanted here. But let's just keep them. And multiplication, I change the division to multiplication, and I do what with this? I flip the fraction. I take the reciprocal, so 21 over 22. Now again, before I do the multiplication, before I multiply across, it's easier if you just reduce right now. So any number on top, any number on the bottom, when you do multiplication, you can take a look if they can reduce. So these two can reduce by dividing both of them by 7 to get 3 and 1. These can reduce by dividing both by 2 to get 11 and 3. Now if I do the multiplication, I forgot the negative here. Okay, so if I do the multiplication, I get negative 3 times negative 3, which gives me positive 9 over 1 times 11, which is 11. And so that is the final answer for that question. Okay, so now when we work with rational numbers, you still need to follow BEDMAS order. So let's take a look at this example that you need to use BEDMAS and work with the fractions. So BEDMAS tells me I do need to do multiplication first, so I do need to do these two first. Okay, now let me go back and just talk about multiplication and division, or addition, subtraction. You should always try to simplify the negative signs. So for example, if you have negative 3 over negative 4, that's the same thing as 3 over 4, so why write the negatives, right? Now other examples will be like negative 3 over negative 4. Well, in this case you have 3 negatives, so negative times a negative is positive, divided by negative is negative. So in this case I don't need 3 of them there, I can just have 1, and that should be enough. Okay, so let's go back to doing the BEDMAS questions. So what we're going to do in this one is do the multiplication first. Again, you need to change them all into improper fractions first. That'll be easiest to do. So 2 times 3 is 6. Plus 1 is 7. So negative 7. Don't forget the negative sign there. And this plus minus here actually could just turn into what? A minus. And this is 3 over 4. And then this is times 1 times 6 is 6, plus 5 is 11. So negative 11 over 6. Now again, I'm going to reduce a little bit. So if I reduce this and this, it'll turn to 1 and 2. If I divide this by 3, I get 1. If I divide this one by 3, I get 2. And so now the multiplication becomes really easy. And so you have negative 7 over 3. Okay, negative times a negative, though, is a positive. So this turns out to be positive 11 over 8. Now we do need common denominators. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this one by, let's say, 3, and this one by 3, and this one by 8, and this one by 8. So what you get is negative 56 over 24 plus 33 over 24. And if I subtract them or add them there, remember it's going to be negative 56 plus 33, and that's going to give you a negative 23 over 24, and that is the final answer. So why don't you try the next question on your own? So maybe you want to pause the video for a little bit and try this question and then play it again and see if you got it right. Okay, so again, you need to follow BEDMAS order, so you do have to do the multiplication here first and then do the addition here. I'm going to go through once and then just try to simplify everything I could, like the addition and subtraction signs, and also change everything to improper fractions. So 2 over 5 times negative 1 over 2, and then this is plus minus, so that becomes just a minus, and then 1 times 4 is 4, plus 3 is 7. So 7 over 4. Now we could reduce this to 1 and 1. So divide 2 and 2 by 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Do the multiplication like this, and that becomes really easy then. It becomes positive times negative is what? Negative. So negative 1 over 5 here, and then you have minus 7 over 4. Now because now we're going to add or subtract, we do need common denominators. So multiply that by 5, multiply this by 4, this one by 4, this one by 5. And so you get negative 4 over 20 minus 35 over 20. And that gives you, again, it's negative 4 minus 35. That gives you negative 39 over 20. And that I should be able to change to negative 1 and 19/20. And that's the end of the question. Now, when we deal with rational numbers, sometimes you have decimals, and that's kind of hard to work with. So you do want to be able to use your calculator and understand how it works, and also be able to just type these questions in your calculator and get an actual answer here. So let's try this one. So why don't you try and